Think of the people you interact with every day. Would you want to spend a day in a canoe with them? Hi, I'm Nathan Mercero, CEO of Planning Alternatives. We're a disruptive brand in the financial planning space with a point of view that true wealth has nothing to do with money. Growing up in a small town in Canada, I experienced examples of families with money and without. It started me on this journey of understanding wealth and the idea that spending a day in a canoe with someone could be one of the best investments you could make. Join me as I sit down with leaders, entrepreneurs, creatives, rule breakers, and friends to discover their perspective of true wealth. And maybe you'll start to shift yours. Well, I'm excited today to be joined by Andrew Buckley. Andrew is an accomplished storyteller, educator, keynote speaker with over 2 decades of experience in creative writing, storytelling, marketing. I just connected with Andrew as a fellow Canadian here before we hit the record button, and we are not going to sing the Canadian national anthem, fortunately for listeners, but I'm excited to welcome you, Andrew, to Day in a Canoe. Maybe you could share your perspective of how you got into storytelling as your major life path here.
Well, thank you for having me, Nathan. I appreciate it. Man, that journey, it's a little bit tricky to kind of figure out the origins of this one, but I was always into writing. Like writing was if I'm being completely honest, like writing was the only thing I was good at in school. I was never a strong student. When it came to anything else, I was not good at math. I'm still not good at math. But all the writing, the creative writing and all those kinds of things, I really loved growing up in the UK. And I had some really, really wonderful, dedicated teachers who kind of nurtured that particular interest for me through secondary school. And I had a vested interest in film, television, movies in particular. And that was kind of where I landed. I went through like a series of, terrible ideas for careers as a young person. And then finally, I was going to go into journalism at one point, and then a career counselor talked me out of it. I'm fairly empathetic, and they figured that would be a horrible thing for me to do because I'd feel far too much of the subject matter that I'm going into. And then I was like, well, I really just want to write film. I really just want to write movies. And that was kind of what I started leaning into. And so when my family emigrated to Canada, a year or two after, I attended the Vancouver Film School for writing in film and television. And that's where it all kind of started.
Now, your books often blend humor and fantasy. Like unpack that combination. Like how do you put that in the mixing bowl and create things?
Well, the world is really funny. It's a funny place to live. I mean, it's not hard to find the humor in things if you're willing to look for the humor in things. And growing up with a British sense of humor and British influences, Monty Python and, British TV, it was pretty easy to kind of see where the origins of my kind of absurdist sense of humor came from. And when it came to writing, it just felt it's the most natural way for me to write. If I try and write something very serious, very emotional, it's a much harder thing to, pull out. When it comes to humor writing, it's an easier thing to do. And when it comes to fantasy, I like all the fantasy stuff. I'm not a literary author. I'm never going to win like the big Canadian Giller Prize or anything like that because that's not the kind of thing I write. I write silly stories about vampires and werewolves and trolls and elves and goblins and those kinds of things. And a lot of my influences came from, Douglas Adams and Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman and Patrick Rothfuss and people who do a really great job of building worlds that are fantastical and in some cases ridiculous. And so that's kind of where most of that comes from for me. And it's my favorite way to write, I suppose.
And how do you get into the creative energy of building out these quirky characters? Are you like, hey, let me just throw something at the wall and see what sticks? Or like you have more of a iterative process that you follow?
In some ways, it comes through the story. The story idea starts first, and then from the story idea, we get into the creative way of building character. In some cases, it's just based on people that I know or that I've met. I'm thinking, man, they would be an awesome character, or some aspects of their personality would make for a really cool character in a book. And then, it's a bit of a recipe. You just mix and match, and slowly we start to build people up. There's a character in my first novel that was published, over a decade ago now. It's there's a crazy little old lady in it that's very much based on my grandmother, who's now 96, living up in Canada. And she's not aware of it either. But
Until
she has
now.
until now, I guess if she listens to this, she'll know. And she's got lots of really just quirky energy and aspects to her personality that it was very easy to kind of build those into one of the characters. And therapeutically, if I meet somebody I don't like, I'm always happy to put them in a book and kill them. It's much better than doing in real life.
Fair enough. That just the story about your grandmother reminds me, being in the finance industry. Sometimes I remember reading a book of a famous portfolio manager who would take conversations from his mother-in-law. And once his mother, who was not well-versed in finance, but when she thought this was a great idea and popular investment, he would pretty much do the opposite of it. And it led to stunning success for him. And the key was that the person didn't know that. His mother-in-law had no idea, and he didn't want to disrupt her flow of insight. So there's probably some parallels in multiple industries where if we just look at the people we hang out with and listen to them, we get some pretty interesting insight.
That's probably true. And I like the idea of being inspired by people and then not knowing it. I don't know what appeals to me about that, but just the general sneakiness of it, I think.
When you're kind of ideating and working on things, what are you doing to build this whole storyline? Are you a sprinter? Are you a marathon runner when it comes to your ideation through the creativity process? Do you need to have a few open storylines always in motion? Like, just give listeners a sense of your internal dashboard of how you're navigating, building out your storytelling.
It's pretty chaotic these days. It was a much more simple process back in the day. So when I went to film school and did screenwriting for a few years, sold some properties, got very disillusioned with the film industry and decided, I'm just going to write novels instead. And I switched tactics. I started writing a novel, which ended up being my debut novel, but at the same time, it didn't get picked up for years. It took me 6 years to write it because I was thoroughly a pantser at that particular point. Ignoring all the structure and stuff that I've been taught at film school, I was like, I'm just going to write free and crazy. And that's what I did. But 6 years is what it took to write that novel. When I got published, and then publishers and my literature agent were like, well, when do we get the next novel? When do we get this? And, everybody has these demands, especially in a world where we have, on-demand streaming and people are used to getting things very quickly. I started to drill down a little bit, and I built a structure for myself that I write to. So now I spend 3 weeks planning around that particular structure system, and I do all my research and everything, and I do only spend 3 weeks. And then after that, I write. And my writing process now takes about 5-6 months to finish a novel, if I'm being properly diligent with it. Jump forward to now, and I'm speaking at 25 conferences this year alone, and teaching courses and doing mentorship and story coaching. And I have a whole other brand, a murder mystery brand that I launched. And now I'm just writing in between everything, like just in the cracks of life, as I've heard it described. That's the only time I actually get to do it. So while I do have everything planned out, I do have it structured, I don't have a very diligent writing process anymore. It's just whenever I can get the pieces done to get as whole. So now it's probably more like a 7-8 month process, I think, to finish a novel for me.
You referred to the whole social media and urgency to consume information thirst that the public has.
Yeah.
What's your take on how writers navigate that? Are we losing the art of writing to the latest TikTok, Instagram, 20-second set of instructions we look at?
I'd say we navigate it fairly badly. For the most part, most writers navigate it badly. It's the one thing that comes up. I worked corporate marketing for 20 years before becoming a full-time author. And during that period, during the last 5-6 years, I've been teaching marketing to authors. And the big thing that always comes up is, do I need to be on social media? Is that a thing I need to do? I'm like, oh God, yeah, you do. You absolutely do. Unfortunately, like, it's the thing that everybody hates to hear and hates to put into practice. But we all love to hate social media. But unfortunately, it's also just a foundational basis for the interactivity between readers and writers. It's how readers find authors these days. It's how they find new work. As you say, we're always competing with TikTok and that kind of stuff. The thing is, as authors and writers, we kind of have to harness all those tools. And I'm not saying that everybody should be on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and X, although nobody should be on X now. But you do need to be able to figure out what you can actually handle. So couldn't we lose ourselves in it? Yeah, of course we can lose ourselves in it. Like, that's very easy to do. If I spent half the time I spent on social media or just actually writing, I'd be finishing stuff way quicker. But you have to maintain this new digital persona and profile that we all have to build for ourselves as part of our branding so that we can keep selling books, so we can keep reaching readers, and so we can keep that conversation going. Otherwise, you become redundant pretty quick.
Speaking of the social media channels, podcasting, which we're on right now, is one
Yes.
that has been really amplified in terms of interest by listeners. And you have a podcast, the StoryCentric. Would you mind sharing what the thesis is of that, and what are the episodes about that you're involved with?
StoryCentric was started as it was actually, the first version of it was called Write Out Loud, and it was 9 years ago. And I thought, podcast, that'll be a great idea. And not really realizing or fully understanding how much freaking work podcasts are. And that one ran for like 7 or 8 episodes. Then I was like, I can't do this anymore. Now, I was a full-time author. A few years ago, I decided I should probably start that up again because, for one thing, it allows me to glean information from people that I wouldn't have the opportunity to talk to in other circumstances. And so every episode of StoryCentric is with a writer or a creator. I've had actors on it. I've had some marketing people on it. Anybody who kind of lives their life to tell stories in one way or the other. And I've been able to interview these people and, just share what makes good story and get their perspective on storytelling in general, how it's evolved, how they do it, best practice. It's been really, really beneficial, just not only as a piece of marketing for myself, my own brand, but just to meet some amazing people and get to have those conversations. It's been really great.
How would you see storytelling as a bridge for human connection? And I know that, we kind of hear stories, we read stories, we watch stories on TV and movies and et cetera. But in this world of social isolation, because of all these influences that we've been talking about, how do we connect the dots here?
It's everything, and we do it so naturally and don't realize it. Like, we've been telling stories since we were scratching, pictures on cave walls. Like, everything it always comes down to communication. It always comes back to communication. We tell stories in order to communicate. We tell stories in order to teach. It's something that we do so naturally and don't realize it most of the time. When we're sharing anecdotal stories with our friends, with our family, at conferences or networking events or anywhere else, story is essential. Story in marketing. It's the basis of selling everything these days, to have a story around it, what the goal of that product is or service or whatever else. So it bleeds into absolutely everything. We don't even realize it most of the time. Right down to the ads on billboards you see on the side of the road, to podcasts, to digital advertising, to education and everything else. It's a part of everything, whether we realize it or acknowledge it or recognize it. It is a big part of everything.
And on the human connection side, what advice or insight would you have on how to be a better storyteller as it relates to the human component, not publishing something, but just relating? Or what are the things that you'd say, hey, just don't do that because it doesn't help the human connection?
So for a couple of years, I taught something called the StoryCentric Method, which was trying to get people. The concept for me was to try and, get corporate people to communicate better, managers and team members and so on and so forth. I stopped doing it because it just always ended up with people crying all the time. And it's not really what I want to put out into the world. And it wasn't a bad crying. It was just the emotionality of people actually having true human connections and telling their stories and how people related and reacted to those stories. It was beautiful in its essence. Not really my jam. But it was something that was kind of amazing to see. The more we share stories with each other, the more we find relatable touch points between each other. And unless we tell our stories, we don't find those. And like you said, we live in a world of social media where we have this wall between everybody, where social media is great because it, connects us with people that we probably wouldn't have been able to connect with. It's also absolute garbage because it is a misrepresentation of your true self in most cases. So the actual human person-to-person interactivity is really, really important these days. And, COVID went a long way to almost killing that. So now people are trying to rediscover how to do that in a lot of ways. We have to talk to each other. We have to communicate. We have to share our stories. We have to find the common through line in our stories, the things that interconnect us, because that's how we communicate. It's how we grow. It's how we find opportunity. Without that, we just don't have anything like that. We don't have the possibility if we don't do that.
I believe in authenticity as being one of the baseline table stake points for storytelling. I think in our culture, in our world, we spend a lot of energy trying to be someone we're not. I don't know how to be more than myself. It's hard enough just to deal with my own human package. So to share that with openness and authenticity, I think is a key formula. And one of the things that we focus on is what we call true wealth, which is what is available in life that's beyond, in our world, the financial numbers. We want people to be secure, but we want people to feel where they're getting energy from things like creativity, whether it's through writing or whether it's other avenues, connectivity with one another, to explore that. How do you personally define what is fulfilling, or as we would call it, true wealth to you, if you were to put that in the Andrew Buckley package?
Your Buckley package. That's a really, really good question. I always, among the people that I have really close ties with, like my co-writers or people that I'm really close to at conferences that I interact with all the time, we always talk about defining what success means to us, to the individual, which I guess is similar to true wealth, because it's different for everybody. And so what I try and encourage new authors to consider when they're first starting to write, or they have a book and they don't know what to do with it, is kind of to establish exactly what that is for them, because, it is different for everybody. For me personally, it kind of came down to a little bit of self-fulfillment in a lot of ways, and also self-driven. I hated working for other people. I always hated working for other people, especially in corporate marketing. It was miserable getting a minor amount of pay when I was getting billed out at a ridiculous amount. That stuff drove me crazy. So part of the reason that I hustled as hard as I did to build my own speaking platform, to build the podcast, to build the author brand and everything else that went with it, was so that I could be self-sufficient and that I didn't need to rely on anybody else. So my true wealth really does come from the fact that I am self-sufficient and I have managed to build this career that I absolutely love, and I'm only doing what I really love to do. I just opened up so many wonderful opportunities, not just to meet people, but to work with people and learn from other people. And that is kind of been my true wealth piece. I mean, and I make a good career. I mean, I'm not saying it's not lucrative. It's very lucrative, but it's also really fulfilling to, do everything that I do and empower other people to write and teach and mentor and speak at conferences like the Jackson Hole Writers Conference, where I am right now. All of that is extremely valuable to me as a person. And it's something that will drive me to work forever because it doesn't feel like work in the common sense.
That is true wealth. Andrew, it's a pleasure to spend time with you in the metaphorical canoe. So glad we connected and look forward to meeting up in person soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Nathan. I really appreciate this.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review. To discover what wealth means to you, please take our assessment at planningalt.com.